Good morning. Good morning. Welcome, everybody, to the Saturday Morning Mastermind. I'm your host, Samantha Studebaker Carl, and I'm here with my good friends Dan and Jason, Karen and Angel and Catherine. And today we're going to continue our discussion of the book Love, Wife, God by Jarrad Hewett. And we are in chapter 8 and on page 126. And I'm going to just read a little section here. But before we get going, I wanted to give my friends an opportunity to introduce themselves. And for those of you who are watching, if you'd like to participate, there's a link there in our Facebook group with the Zoom link where you can jump in here and participate in the conversation. Or if you just want to leave a comment below the video, we'd be happy to add that thought into what we're talking about. And for those of you who are watching on YouTube, you can find us by looking for Mindset Mastery Collective on Facebook, or just go to mindsetmasterycollective.com and you'll find a link to get into our Facebook group. So with that, guys, all right, go ahead, jump out and introduce yourselves, and then we'll get this chat going.
Hey, good morning, everybody. Jason Roberts here from Tampa Bay, and it's great to be here.
And I'm Karen Lohoff in Mesa, Arizona.
I'm Angel Studebaker down here in Beaufort, South Carolina.
Dan Sisek in Las Vegas, Nevada.
Hello, it's Catherine Clement.
Good morning, everybody. Well, last week we talked a little bit about why fear blocks us from creating what we want. And this next section talks a little bit about why our creation can alleviate. Once we embrace the fact that we are self-creators, that we can alleviate some of that fear, or all of it potentially. So it starts out with, remember that by simply being here, you are in self-creation. If you knew that and embraced that and truly embraced all of creation as your own, would you be in fear of any other? And then Jarrad says, well, some people are just crazy. and then they said, well, just like that, you've given away your creative power over to those you perceive as crazy. If you truly knew that you were the creator of all that you experience, you would not be afraid of anyone, even the crazy. You would know without a doubt that no one could do anything to you, and that if you found yourself in an unlikable or dangerous situation, you would know that you created it through the activation of fear, and you would know how to create the change you wish to experience. So let's talk about that a little bit. So if we knew that we were the creators of our whole kind of personal existence, and if something happened if we knew that we were a creator, and that when we're in fear, we create things that are something for us to be afraid of, then we're really creating our own, what's kind of like a self-fulfilling prophecy, if you will. And then if we recognize that, then by not being fearful of things that we think are out of our control, because it's all within our control, then we wouldn't have anything to be afraid of. I think that's kind of what it's trying to tell us. What do you guys think?
I've got a couple of things that have come to my mind as you were reading that. One, there's a man here who actually lives in a room, let's say 5 rooms beyond mine. So he sometimes goes past my room. I will leave my door open if I know a med tech is coming, or a nurse is coming, or the person who picks up the clothes to do laundry. In other words, if I'm expecting someone and I know who it is, I'll leave the door open, and that way I can go ahead and do what I'm doing and, keep an eye on things and so forth. And for the longest time, he would go past. I could see that he was looking in my room, and then when he could see that I was looking, then he would put his head down, face forward, and go on by like he'd never looked in. I caught him in the elevator one day and I said, "What's your name?" And he said his name is Bob, but he said most people called him Donald Duck. And I knew that, that made sense to me because I don't know if it's his wheelchair or if it's his mouth. I wasn't sure what it was, but when he goes by, he does sound like Donald Duck. So yesterday, I was out in the hall. They were cleaning my room, and I knew he couldn't get by without me going on past. I did that, and he started to talk to me. It was the first time I realized that he really could logically speak and say things, and he was, quite bitter about whatever it was that he was talking about, and I just kind of, listened. And then later I went into the dining room. He was sitting alone, and so I sat at the same table. And he was bitter about something else, and so I was just listening to that. And then he took off, which I thought was strange that he didn't say goodbye or I'm leaving or anything. He just took off. So I spent a little bit of time yesterday thinking about that, why people do that, what that could mean. Is it something to be concerned about? And I'm just going to leave you with that. I don't know if you want to talk about any of that further, but that's one situation that came to mind. Another situation that came to mind is that I was watching an old crime show, and it was from the 90s, and 4 girls in high school had gone by and picked up, well maybe, I think they probably were in high school because they were driving, but they'd gone by and picked up a 12-year-old girl. And over a course of the evening, they stabbed her, they beat her several times, and eventually, and they put her in the trunk, and eventually they wrapped her in a blanket and lit her on fire while she was still, she was still alive. And, I think about situations like that where people are so young, 12. I mean, I'm sure she's never heard of a book like this. She's probably never heard of concepts like this. I've managed to hear of concepts like this over the last 20 years, and at my age of 71, we're talking, a grown adult who would think about things like this. That's when I really wonder, what do these things mean in the context of children, for example? So I want to throw that out there, because if anybody would like to respond to any of that, it would be helpful to me, because this isn't the first time that I've thought about stuff like this.
I think this is a really difficult concept. Go ahead, Dan, jump out.
Well, no, I was going to ask I was trying to find where you were reading from, what page, but I didn't, and I only caught part of what you were reading, so I wanted to kind of and see what I think in relation to what Karen was saying.
Yeah, I was on page 126.
Oh, okay.
And basically the 2 middle paragraphs, the bigger one and the smaller one.
Okay, thanks.
Could you go ahead and read that beginning part of it again? I appreciate it.
Yeah, I can read it again if you want. Yeah, I'll just read the whole section again. All right. It says, remember that by simply being here, you are in self-creation. If you knew that and embraced that and truly embraced all of creation as your own, would you be in fear of any other? And then, and this is Spirit talking. And then Jarrad says, well, yeah, some people are just crazy. And then Spirit goes back and says, well, just like that, you've given away your creative power over to those you perceive as crazy. If you truly knew that you were the creator of all that you experience, you would not be afraid of anyone, even the crazies. You would know without a doubt that no one could do anything to you, and that if you found yourself in an unlikely or unlikable or dangerous situation, you would know that you created it through the activation of fear, and you would know how to create the change you wish to experience.
Okay, now that I know what you were reading and putting it into.
Sorry, my squeaky voice earlier was probably making it hard to follow what I was saying.
No, I just was trying to find it, and so I missed half of what you were saying and couldn't formulate. And then when Karen, now I can put it all. For me, going back to some of the personal things I've gone through, and being a kid going through that, yeah, I had no idea, no concept of what this was saying. And so, yes, I was afraid. Yes, I was scared. I went to people I trusted, like my grandparents, as best as they could, and went to them to get the help I needed to relieve some of those issues, but they couldn't always do that. And so therefore the pain and the hurt still came. So to me, when it says that, remember that by simply being here, and then it goes down and it says, just like that, you give me your creative power over to those you perceive as crazy. If you truly knew that you were the creator of all that you experienced, you would not be afraid of anyone, even the crazies. But yet, in the reality, let's say you're standing in front of somebody and they're pointing a gun at your head. And the reality is that if they pull that trigger, that bullet's going to come through you. Now, you may not die, you may live, or you may get paralyzed, or you may get, that reality is there in this physical world. So you have to deal with it. And it does cause fear, because unless you have a gun of your own or a way of somehow of, because sometimes you can talk your way out of it, yes, but sometimes you can't, because they're so far on their side of what they're doing that any little provocation might cause them to, let's say, shoot that gun or do something with that knife or whatever they have that they can wield. To me, that's still hard to sit there and say, oh, well, this isn't really happening to me. I can just step out of this and it's all going to be okay. And that's where I have problems sometimes with this book, because, I can't just magically say, okay, I'm not in this situation and disappear out of it. You still have that physical and that, in this plane of that stuff happening. And that's, like I said, where I can maybe help myself get through it by understanding that in the long run, I have control over me and myself and how I respond. And I can have strength to not let it be the overriding factor overall in my life as life progresses. But in that moment, I'm going to be afraid. I'm going to be fearful. And I'm going to be worrying about whether or not I'm going to actually still be living tomorrow or not, or be able to carry on. Some people are not able to carry on even under the simplest, or what we would think would be like, oh, that's not that hard. Why are you letting that bother you? And I think that's part of where, our own mental frame framework in how we perceive things and how we deal with things, you know, goes back to like the old saying, sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never harm me. But words hurt, words cut. But it depends on how you approach words or approach those actions or approach what that person's doing and how you move past it. But I still think in those moments, it's still there and it's still very tangible, and it's something that we all have to work on and build on and grow on to be able to move past and live life on the other side of it, of whatever happens.
I think this is it's a difficult concept to wrap your head around, and because I can see, if I look back over my life, I can see how my choices and decisions put me where I was at any given moment. And as much as I want to say that it was someone else's fault, I can't say that, because I landed there for whatever reason. But yet at the same time, when we're in the midst of something and it is scary as hell, whatever is happening to us, how can we sit there and say, okay, well, if I'm just not afraid, it's not going to hurt, or it's not going to be unpleasant, or it's not going to happen? I don't think that's true at all, because we can't just think our way out of something. Or, I don't know. I suppose it depends on your point of view, if we go back to that whole saying of, work the problem instead of just not working the problem, then obviously if something scary is happening, then if we feel like we have some level of power over something, even if it's just the way that we're thinking about it, then maybe we can think a way out of the situation. I really don't know. And yet at the same time, like Karen, when you're talking about that girl, I can't even imagine what that would be like. It's horrific, and we see all of these horrific things that are happening around the world, and that have always happened around the world throughout our whole entire history of time. And to think that we are the ones that are creating this, and why in the hell would we do that? And of course we've had that conversation before in previous books of maybe before we came here we planned this whole crazy environment for us to experience it for who knows what reason. And but when you're talking about children, obviously, when I was little, I had no concept of any of this at all whatsoever. And if I had, I don't know that I would have understood it anyway. And the younger that you go back, the less you have knowledge and knowing and all of that. You just kind of are in existence, and whatever's happening is happening. So this concept that you might have any kind of influence on it at all whatsoever is kind of mind-boggling. But yet at the same time, I can see with my grandchildren that they make choices, and they they act certain ways when they want to influence a situation. And so whether we realize it or not, we do have influential influence over our situations, even when we're young. And so it's an interesting concept. How we can't say that we aren't creators, because we obviously are, but yet are we 100% creating all of it? I don't know. It's hard to know, because we're all here together, and if we're all creating, we're all interacting, we're all influencing each other. It seems mind-boggling that any of us have any control over it at all.
I'll jump back out, because when you're talking about it, and I'm going to use one specific instance that I really remember very vividly and very well with my stepdad. And yes, I'm going to start out that in the beginning, he was teaching me how to box a little bit or whatever and stuff like that. And I still remember when he said, hit me, come on, hit me. And I'm like, I don't want to hit you. You're my dad, I, I just want you to give me the pointers and show me and what to do. But he's telling, and then, so I finally got to the point and he kept saying it. So I finally, yes, I made the decision. I jumped up and punched him in the eye. But then I went back and said, oh, I'm sorry, I'm sorry. And that was an actual, and I was a kid because at that point you don't want to do anything to hurt anybody per se. And you're looking for the guidance and everything from them because even though you wield influence and stuff and things like that in situations, you don't understand that you might understand on a very low grade level that you have some influence, but if mom and dad put their foot down and say no, this, that, or the other thing, I'm going to ultimately listen and obey. But when when I went back and said, "Oh, I'm sorry," and he got mad, he literally lost it. That's when he lost it. That's when he went overboard. He says, "You never say you're sorry," and then he picked me up physically and threw me across my room to where I landed on my wall, halfway up horizontally, slid down onto my bed. Now, at that moment, that's when I think I kind of lost control. I leapt off my bed, landed in his arms. I didn't hit the floor. I leapt off the bed, landed in his arms, bit him on the chest, right in this area where your heart is. I would not let go. I would not let go. And so at that point, yeah, that was pure raw, basic survival. And that, no, I'm going to survive this. But in that, I was so terrified and so it the whole thing, but yet I did not deserve to have him react that way, and I did not deserve to be treated that way. When something started out as something as little and innocent and wanting to learn how to protect myself later on for at school or whatever, when somebody was bullying me or something like that. So to me, I think this says, it's hard for me to really, and right now I'm getting worked up over it. I'm shaking because of those memories and that thought and how, but yet I learned at that moment how far I I will go to protect myself or my sister or my family or any. So I mean, uh, it the raw emotions that are coming up. So in that sense, it's hard for me to really sit there and say, oh, I could have created and just decided, oh well, this isn't really happening. This isn't going on. This isn't, something that I created. I still do not think to this day I created that situation. I responded it to it, but I still do not think I created it. I think there, as the person and who he was, forced me into responding the way I did. And this is one area where I still have a hard time where that I have absolute control over everything because I don't really think I have absolute control of me, but I don't have absolute control over everything else that happens. And I do have control of how I respond. But when you're younger and as a kid, sometimes you respond purely in the only way you think you know how. And that was how I responded.
Wow, that's that's as a child, I can't imagine um, going through that particular type of a scenario. Um, it brings me what you said earlier, Karen, and what you're saying there, Dan. And about how we can be forced to react, forced into situations at such an early age that when we don't have the knowledge to understand, we don't have the knowledge to see it coming, we don't know how to react to these outside forces, let alone the inside forces of our own emotions. So it brings to my mind the, how having a lack of knowledge and an abundance of fear can culminate in really a, creating an existence that is not not something that we want in our life, so, and there's more to it, I know, but let me just leave it there for a minute. I guess I was just thinking that how fear can motivate us, but it can also paralyze us. And it can also, fear can cause us to prepare for something. Preparing can certainly help us to achieve the outcomes we want, but it doesn't mean that, there's that old saying of about the best laid plans. Not necessarily, doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to, reach our goals, but having a plan does allow us to have a better outcome if the outside forces are in tune with what we're trying to get done as well. But then the knowledge that, knowledge of knowing that there are these outside forces that can come into play, and not allowing the fear of them paralyze us, but allowing that fear drive our better planning or better recognition of it in advance, so we know how to avoid it. But when you're at such a young age, or you're at an age where, or even a position in life, gone through a type of understanding of life or willingness of wanting life to be a certain way, where we don't have the knowledge, we haven't wanted to think that way and perceive things as being so dangerous, and other people being dangerous, and thinking about how am I going to protect this, or how am I going to attack this situation, or protect myself from this person if this happens. Because I think some of us, there's all these different personality types they talk about, and two totally different types of personalities I can imagine are those who want to go out and have and affect everything out there, and others that want to accept life or experience life as it comes to them, as it unfolds. And then there's all this in between as well. But those are just two kind of ways I think people might think about going through life. What is the universe going to bring my way, and what or the opposite of what can I take advantage of in the universe and make it go my way. I don't know. I'll go ahead and stop and let someone else talk. But I definitely think yes, we are part of our creation. We can affect a lot of our creation, but we're limited, and there's all these outside forces too. If we're not aware of them, we have to have the knowledge, and also understand how to deal with our own emotions, as well as dealing with other people's emotions and these outside forces.
Oh, sorry. I didn't even realize I was still unmuted till just now. I'll mute. Go ahead, Catherine.
I think this book is, when it refers to you creating things in your life, I do think that it's, as we're older and we're making conscious choices about things, yes, I think we can definitely bring things into our life. I see people that worry about stuff all the time, and that shit never happens to them. So
I don't know what makes the magic necessarily. You know, why can you worry about one thing and that thing never happens, and then you feel like you're perfectly safe in another situation, and then some bad shit happens, you know? So I get where he's coming from. You have to keep in mind, these are entities that are speaking to him from a spiritual perspective. And so I do think that as far as things that happen to us in childhood, those are things that perhaps were pre-planned before we came in. So yes, it was our choice. We created that, but not in this human form. We created it, although we can create in our human form. So it's both, you know, it's not an either or. Nothing has to be either or. And I think that's one of the things that they're pointing out. I also think that this book was written to help decrease suffering, just like all of the books that we have read. If you look at all the books that we've read, all those books have been about decreasing suffering in one way or another. Whether it's we learned how to control what we say to ourselves, or whether we learned how to interact with others better through the 5 love languages, or we learned how to find balance and peace through the Tao Te Ching. Like, all of these books are focused on decreasing suffering, and I think this one is too. And sometimes I think that the only way to decrease the suffering in a moment is to know in your heart that this entire lifetime and every one of these fucked up or messed up situations is a split second in time that doesn't even exist, and we're okay. Like, we're going to live through it. Even if we die, we're still going to live through it. And so I think it takes that approach as well, that even when the worst of the worst is happening to us here in this body, in this lifetime, in this experience, this too shall pass. And we are going to be okay, because the suffering happens to the body, and often because we don't understand why whatever is happening is happening. That's what causes the suffering, I think, more than many things. But so this book, you know, it's not a blender manual necessarily. Like, I mean, it can be taken literally, but not all at the same time, if you get my drift. Like, I think they take a very observer of the observer viewpoint of, yes, everything's going to be fine, and yes, you're in control of everything, but that's not necessarily can be translated literally. The other thing that we always have to keep in mind is that every situation is not necessarily, I mean, it is for our benefit on some level, some plane, but it could be completely for someone else. So I don't know. In that instance, and this I'm just throwing this out there. I'm not saying this is what it is, but, you know, maybe your stepfather needed the lesson of somebody coming back at him like that in a very primal way for whatever reason. You know, maybe that was you teaching him something in that moment. I mean, who knows why the hell that happened? I don't know. It's a horrible thing, and it shouldn't happen. But when we get into the shouldn'ts, that's when the suffering comes, because we have to learn to accept what is. And we're kind of crazy when we try to think that something different should be, because if something different should be, it would be. So we have to learn how to accept what is, and that's really the only way to get rid of the suffering.
Yeah, I think you're right, Catherine. And as far as the suffering goes, because, you know, if we think we don't have any control over any of it, and it's all not our fault in any way, shape, or form, then I think we suffer more thinking about all the injustices that have been done to us than if we think that we have some control over it and that we've made choices that put us in whatever situation that we happen to be in at any given moment. We still have the thing happen and we still have to suffer through that. But when we can take some level of responsibility for that happening in the first place, and I'm not saying that it's our fault necessarily, and because obviously there's more than us involved in the situation. But if we really were to take this whole concept literally, that it is our own doing that we're here in the first place, and that all the choices that we make lead to all the things that happen to us, then if we look at it that way, then yeah, I mean, we've created it all. And if we can accept that, then we can make different choices to not create any of the crap that we've created in the past in the future. And yet at the same time, that concept is difficult to wrap your head around, and to think that we would come here and make these choices and have these experiences when they're so painful and so we suffer so much through them is it's hard to take that as I mean, I can't. It's hard to take that concept as literal, I guess. I don't know. And yeah. Go ahead, Dan.
I was going to jump out, and I posted in a comment on the live stream that I believe that we all have lived through something in life that was the defining moment in our life that points to how we move forward in life from that point on. And I think I'm going to add to that is that now, as I've gotten older, I know the depth of what I really can do and how primal, so to speak, I can get in either protecting myself or people that I love and care about. But at the same point, I think if you were to ask most of my friends or anybody that knows me, they don't really think of me as being a confrontational or combative, or I think they would say they would look at me and say, you did that, you could be like that. And that's part of, I think at that moment, that's something that also scared the living hell out of me too, because it's like, whoa, I mean, I can get that. I understand I can get to that level. And I think that's why I've learned as I've gotten older. I warn people, I tell them, look, if you leave me alone, let me work through whatever this is, whatever I'm mad at you about or whatever we're having, and I will come to the point where I'll get to it and I work through it. And once I'm there, I'm fine. They're probably, but I warn people, if you push me and you push me to that level, you're going to get back at you. Now, I may not come at you like I did, like my, stepdad, but I will come back and you will know really the raw result of where I'm coming from. So I've learned that part of myself to learn, give forewarning, and two, I don't try to put myself in those situations where that's going to be what does happen or come out. And so I think for me, that was a defining point for me, to help me understand me better too. And so therefore, because I do believe that in a lot of ways I can control, some of what I do and what I'm about, but it's that unknown of how other people that I need to be ready for, so that way when it does come about, I can sit there and say, okay, well, this is not the normal. How am I going to respond? And to respond in a way that's more appropriate rather than more fear related, I guess is how I'll say it. And so that way I can hopefully put back out something back towards equilibrium, or back to where they talk about all love conquers all. And I do believe that. I believe love does conquer it all if it's within the right shape and context, and hopefully the other side receives it. If not, you're still going to have that imbalance, and you still have to find a way of keeping yourself in balance too. And I think that's what I try to do now in a lot of ways. It's still hard, and I still have my moments, and I can work myself up. I can be seeing something on TV or watch something or hear something on the news or this or that, and in my head I would be like, oh, and think of all the things of how I would respond, and then I have to relook at it and say, well, is there a better way or something else that could be done, or a better avenue, and things like that. And I think that's the thing, is humanity hasn't fully learned how to respond better. I'll put it that way, in a lot of circumstances that people are put in.
Let me read this next section because I feel like it kind of it goes into a little bit what we're basically just talking about here, because Jarrad, he asks the questions. He says, how do you explain that to people who have lost loved ones in wars or attacks? And of course, he's referring back to the part we read before. And Source says, you don't, for no one has been lost. This is why we come forth, so you can better know your union with Source. No one goes anywhere with regard to a finite resting place. You always exist. And, of course, Catherine mentioned that a little bit ago. And then he says, and for those who don't believe that, and it goes on to say, their suffering will eventually awaken them to self-creation. This is why we have asked you to release your emotional attachments. They block you from the truth. And the truth is only you create your life. And so that's kind of what we're talking about here a little bit, is that, maybe part of this whole human existence is to come here, go through some shit, and then come to a realization, if you will, that we are connected to Source, that we are able to create our own lives and change the way that we look at things and change how we respond to things. And then from this point forward, once we come to that realization that we have control when we thought we didn't have any control, now we realize we do have control and we can create our lives from this point forward. And that's basically what it's saying, is that, you can't fix it for anyone else. They have to go through their own shit to get to the point where they recognize that they're connected with Source as well. So, I don't know. It's all kind of, I think that's just what it's trying to do. I kind of wonder sometimes, if this is just a big video game, and the whole goal, if you win the game and you figure out that you're really just somebody playing a game. I hope that's what it is, because if not, there's some shit happening here that is just, I can't imagine if we're only here for this one blip, this tiny little blip in existence, and then it's all just horrible and suffering and painful. And I don't know. I'm not saying that every moment of my life is painful and suffering, because it's not, I try not to focus on that stuff that sucks. I try and focus on the stuff that is pleasant and positive and enjoyable, and but there's some of the time where it just sucks, and it's hard. It's so frustrating when you try and do something and it doesn't work out, and then you're like, what the hell? What did I do wrong? Why didn't this work the way I was hoping for it to? Or like Catherine was saying earlier about people who worry about stuff, and you worry about something and nothing ever comes of it, but yet then you think everything's going great and some shit happens and you're like, how did I create this mess? I don't even know.
I think between what you and Catherine have been saying, and I'm getting to that point as an adult. I'm learning a lot of those things, but I also feel that there are some people that don't ever get it. that they don't. I know somebody personally that does not get it, and this person blames the world for everything happening to them. I think just literally everything happening to them. I have come to the realization that some of the things that did happen to me are what helped forge me into being the type of person I am and how I look at life and how I view life. And I believe that it ultimately has done a lot of good for me and prepared me, equipped me. But I think that there are a lot of people out there in the world that view that everything just happens to them and that it's through no fault of their own.
Yes, and look how they suffer. They suffer horribly. When you feel like the whole world is against you and nothing is in your control and you're a complete victim, that's the most horrible suffering ever. At least, like you were saying, Samantha, at least if we can step up and take responsibility for some of it, if not all of it, that lessens the suffering when we know that we can make changes. We're not just stuck with what we are. We're not just stuck with our beliefs, because beliefs are just thoughts that we think over and over and over until finally it's a belief, and we can change those beliefs by the thoughts that we think. I'm starting to sound like a Dr. Seuss book at the moment, I think. But by the thoughts that you think. I'm pretty sure I read that in a Dr. Seuss book. But I don't know. Sometimes it just takes the most horriblest of things to make us get to the point where we surrender to God, Creator, Spirit, whatever it is. And we have to be like driven to our knees and whacked over the head with a concrete pole, for so many hours until we're finally just okay and we just surrender. And in that moment of surrender, that is that reconnection to source. But sometimes that's what it takes to get us there for whatever reason. And we can think that we're as close to source as we can get, but we never really are, because there's so much stuff that comes up in the human. We also have to remember we're animals, you guys. That's why you jumped on him and bit him, Dan. That was your animal coming out to protect you. That's a natural human response, actually. I mean, we don't see it very often, but it is when you think about the fact that we're animals and you were in a threatening situation. So, yeah, I bet that was a defining moment for you. You discovered a power in yourself there by that maybe you might not have found otherwise. A power that you might not have thought a whole lot about because you were trapped behind the trauma involved in it, but a power that has probably served you throughout your life, or maybe from this day forward will, who knows, but I don't know why it has to take these horrible things to do that, to learn those lessons, or to connect with source in a real, I give it up to you, God, kind of way, like I can't handle this. I don't know what to do. And I've tried everything. I've banged my head against every wall. I've gone every direction. I surrender. And that is one of the most peaceful moments ever, and but I think we also have to keep in mind that absolutely, there's a little bit of chat here going, are we in the matrix? Yes, we're in a matrix, you guys. We're in a matrix, whether you want to call it the consciousness or what. But I know through remote viewing that I can tap into that and get information. So it's some kind of a matrix of some sort. Now, when we think of the movie and we think of all of the stuff that happened in the movie, I mean, look at the young people these days, especially, who are doing superhuman athletic things that we thought the human body was not even capable of. These humans are doing now. So why can their bodies do that and my body can't do that? What's the difference there? And you could probably drive yourself crazy thinking about it. But what I do know is that there are things that I can do and I am doing to make my body be able to do more than it is now. And who knows where I'll get to. I mean, I'm not putting any limits on where I can get to, but somehow they come in just saying, oh, well, I can run a 1 minute mile or whatever. Nobody's ever done it in history, but they do it, or they can leap across from this tree to that tree like Tarzan. And, it's really a fascinating experience here. And trying to figure it out is, I tried to keep it, my thought process, as it being intriguing and exciting rather than from a negative. I can't even think of a word right now, but daunting, or try to, like it's a puzzle, or like I'm a detective or something, trying to figure it out rather than, oh, I have to figure this out or I'm just going to suffer forever. You know what I mean? Like, I just have to try to keep it on that inquisitive, because I do know how short this life is. And nobody's going to know any of us, probably, when we're gone, except our families and stuff, and so we take it so seriously, and maybe we don't need to.
I hear that, Catherine. I hear it. I hear what you're saying. And then there's still the idea that, we only have this one life, this one opportunity. And so isn't it also natural that we're somewhat restless in wanting to make the most of it and, rise above what, these outside forces and even inside forces? Dan mentioned something in the chat, about how moving forward from events in our lives, we can, I guess the basic idea is that, it can be a growth experience depending on how we choose to look at it. And I think that's kind of what you were saying as well, how we perceive the experience and, whether we move forward from it or we're stuck in it, how long are we stuck in it, or how quickly can we move forward in it, from it. I go back to the idea of knowledge and understanding, being able to see it from the outside rather than being within it and kind of stuck in it, can certainly help us to sort of snap out of it. I think things in life bombarding us, these outside forces that are causing these internal turmoils and whatnot, can really put us in a funk, kind of in a mental hole, So, but having the knowledge of as you guys were talking, it reminded me that having knowledge of tools to help bring us out and elevate us above these mental holes or above these experiences, whether it's groups like this and books and knowledge like that, or music. I think music can be very helpful in kind of snapping us out of a bad mental state, helping us to rise above that which is kind of keeping us down, so that we can then make some progress that gives us the momentum to build towards what it is we're trying to achieve. Surrendering to things, I kind of agree that can be helpful, in that that we might say, well, hey, if all this is taken away from me, will I be okay? And working through that in your mind and realizing that, yeah, you're going to be okay, that things, that, like what you said, that all things would pass. But that's not really where we want to be. That's not where we want to be working towards. It doesn't, for me, it doesn't make me want to get up and go and get things done and be happy and improve on myself so much. But I think it helps in kind of getting a baseline and kind of taking away some of that fear that might paralyze you or get us so caught up in the worry that we hesitate, or that we hesitate and allow other things to other outside forces to influence us, or we hesitate and we make the wrong decisions, or we don't take advantage of opportunities because we hesitate out of fear. But sometimes we're, like you said, we're sort of these animals. We sort of have this instinct, and we kind of get caught up in our own emotions and reactions. So I just want to bring it back to, having the tools, remembering that there are these tools out there and utilizing them to give us that boost, to help us even when there's nobody else around, whether it's reading a book, reading poetry, or listening to some music, or getting out into nature, whatever it might be. Have a toolbox or a bag of tricks, so to speak, to snap us out of that funk and get us up out of that hole as quickly as possible, so we can move forward and create some more positive things in our own lives and also in others. So that's where I'd like to go with it.
Well, we're at the top of the hour here. Oh, Karen, jump out. I was going to tell everybody to just share a final thought anyway before we wrap up.
Well, thank you. Jan said something about that he knows people even now that don't get it, just don't get it. And that was back a ways when we were talking about, that our lives are to connect us to source and understanding and so forth. And I found it really fascinating last night. I was watching a show in Ireland, and a man was tracking down his, he thought he had a child by this woman, and he just, who knows what he had done with his life, but he decided to go back and find this son. And in talking to people about his son, he learned his son was a homosexual, and he could not tolerate that. And so he was killing a number of people in the course of finding out about this, in particular bikers. And he had just finished killing off this one biker that the two policemen who had come upon the scene knew enough to know that he would not go down easy, and he would not, be begging for his life. The modus operandi that this one guy had was that he used a blowtorch to, create a lot of suffering and frightening and all that kind of thing. And the youngest policeman started to tell him that that was his son, that there had been twins, and that the mother, being 16 years old, was only able to keep one of the children, the one that he knew about, and that this son had gone off to live with somebody in the country and really had a life that toughened him up. And he essentially was the kind of son that this man would clearly want, that would just deal with life essentially like you and I might hope that we could in a really terrible situation. And it was interesting to think about, because it was true that there were twins involved, but the rest of the story that this young cop told was all made up in his head for the purpose of wiping the smile off the face of this father, this murderer, this this man who just felt like he could control everyone around him, and he could not have to deal with a son that was a homosexual. And it gave me a lot to think about, especially as we were talking here about whether or not people get things, because this man was clearly just evil at heart, didn't care about anyone, would kill and torture men and women, girls and young men. And here he was listening to a story that was made up, and thinking that he had killed the kind of son that he wished he had. And I think sometimes when we think about our situations affecting us in a way that overcome suffering or overcome our evil intents, or whatever that might be, there are life experiences that can cause the worst individual to, for their life to turn around. Who knows what happened with this man, but we all know that there are people who had an evil past who became essentially saints. So I just wanted to share that.
Well, and they are saints. I mean, they're playing a part here. I mean, this is my belief. They're playing a part. And I look at people like that and I think how, I wonder if their soul, because all of our souls, I think, are good. I wonder how much they suffer, how much their soul picks up on this evil part that they're playing, or is it just fun to play it? Like maybe it would be in a motion film. I still, for my own personal sanity and for less suffering on my own behalf, this is just completely selfish. I still have to believe that all of these parts are voluntarily chosen to play to bring out whatever gifts or reasons or, whatever, that it does serve all of us in some way. Because when we see those actions that they take and we have that, oh my God, that's horrible. How could they do that? We have that empathy for that, the victim of that situation. I think it's good for us to recognize that, and I don't know that we could recognize it if we didn't see it. So, so it does serve. There's a purpose, and I just always remember, no matter how horrible a person's deeds are, I always keep that in mind, that they're playing a part to serve, and that they're really, you know, we're all part of God, and that is love. So they're really love, and this is just a really sick kind of a, I don't know, sorry God, but this is really just kind of a sick sort of a game that we play here, to you know, to have to witness and see and live through some of the stuff that we do to get these lessons. It seems like there could be an easier way, but there isn't, obviously, or that's what would be. So I hope you guys have a wonderful week.
Well, when you were just talking, Catherine, it brought me back to like one of the two previous books. I can't remember which one said this, but that, you know, before we come, we plan and work out with in this spiritual realm with those that we know in that realm to plan out our lives. But it also talked about like that one or two that would sit there and say, well, I'm going down there and I'm going to do just whatever I want outside of the plan, just to screw things up. And, you know, and that might be back to kind of, you know, this part where, you know, I don't know. I don't have the answers, and I have my thoughts and stuff. But who knows? Maybe that's part of it, is that little monkey wrench that's thrown in to kind of help bring out our own awareness of ourselves, and where, like I said, I know how far I can go, and I probably could go deeper and be even more primal than I did at that one instant. But maybe that's just to help us get closer to that balance of the equilibrium of everything, and to where we have the least amount of stress, but also enough stress there to keep us cognizant of what's going on, and to keep moving forward in our lives, to, for me, like, express love, and getting better at expressing love to everybody and those around me and those in my life, and not necessarily in my life directly, but, you know, indirectly, to hopefully spread it out farther.
How about Angel? I saw you unmute before. Share your thoughts.
Well, Dan kind of covered it, so yeah. So yeah, but yeah, Dan kind of hit what I was going to talk about. So
Well, we've talked about a lot of different things here today, and you know, for those of you who are watching, if you want to be in on this conversation, you can find us by going to mindsetmasterycollective.com. There you'll find a link to get in our Facebook group. You'll see our blog posts, replays of our videos, et cetera, et cetera. We'd love to have you on here and have you share your thoughts on this. I mean, you know, I don't know the answers. You guys don't all know the answers. We're just guessing. And, you know, in reading these books, every book we read, we come across a different kind of a concept, or a similarity, you know, concept that's somewhat similar with a different take on it, or whatever. And so it's just fascinating to kind of look at these topics and look at our lives and go, okay, what if, what is, this is what they're saying, what if this is true, how does that affect me in my life, how would that change the way I think about things or respond to things? And you know, but we don't know what the real answer is, and we won't know until we cross over to the other side, right? And, you know, maybe it is just a big game and we're all just down here goofing off and we don't even realize it and we're taking it way too seriously. Or maybe there's nothing on the other side and this is all we get. And these moments that we have right here, that's possible too. I don't believe that, you know, based on everything and how we can interact with each other and intuition and remote viewing, like Catherine was talking about, and psychic abilities and all of these, you know, people saying that they're talking to spirits on the other side. I can't imagine that this one little blip of, you know, minuscule amount of time that we're here is all that there is. That seems impossible, but it is possible. You know, it could be that we're no different than an ant, that once our life is over, nobody knows the difference. We're just gone. I mean, who knows? But I love talking about this stuff because then we can explore these ideas and see what that means for us in our lives and see how it changes our entire lives based on just some different way of looking at things. So if you're into that, then jump in here with us. We'd love to have you discuss your ideas with us too. So with that, guys, have a great, awesome, amazing week, and we'll see you next time on the Saturday Morning Mastermind. Bye for now.